Alrighty, so one of my favorite patterns, right next to render props, is the state reducer pattern. So let's pop in our tests here, testing the exercise version. And the error that we're getting here is, actually, if you look at the test, it's kind of fun. We're just calling toggle a bunch of times. I added little comments just to make things a little less confusing. So at toggle number 5, so between each one of these, it should be off, it should be on, should be off, should be on. And then when I toggle it the 4th time, it should stay off. And then the rest of the times I try to toggle it, it should stay off. So yeah, and then we do some assertions to make sure things were called properly and stuff. And so where it's failing is it's toggling it that 5th time, but it should stay off. It's not, it's toggling on. So that is what we're going to solve here with our internal set state function. This is going to accept our updates, or you could call it changes. That's what I called it, callback. So this simulates the same kind of API that set state has. So all of the times that you're calling set state, you should now call internal set state, and it will take care of calling set state under the hood. So that's what this koala bear was doing. I should have put him right there and then right there, but it is what it is. Sorry, Cody. Okay, so with that, we're going to call this.set state, and we'll get our state as an argument to our updater function, and then we'll pass a callback as the second parameter, so we can call on toggle and on reset when that state's happened. Okay, so now that we have the current state here, maybe I'll just differentiate it by calling it current state. We need to get what the actual changes are, because in some cases the changes will just be an object. In other cases, the changes could be a function. So we need to get what those changes are. So I'll have, let's see, what did I call it? I don't know, actual changes, or the changes object. That's what I called it. And then we'll say type of changes. It's a function. Then I'll call it with the current state. Otherwise, we'll just use changes. Okay, cool. And let's give myself a little bit more room on the editor side. Okay, so now we have the changes object, and that's what we're going to be calling the state reducer with. So we'll say reduced changes equals this dot props dot state reducer with the current state and the changes object. And its responsibility is to take that changes object and return me a new one. And that's what I'm going to return from my updater. Reduced changes. And that's it. That's the simple case. There are a couple other things we need to consider, but that's the basic idea of a state reducer. Is it internally, inside the component, you replace all usages of set state with internal set state, and that uses an updater function to get what the changes should be, and then replaces or returns the reduced version of those changes. Now, the reducer could just return the changes object that you give it. That's like totally cool if it does that. Or it could totally change it to something entirely different. But whatever it gives us back is what we're going to be returning. So there are a couple other things that I want to talk about here, but and I'll go ahead and do this really quick, actually. So let's say that the state reducer will return like null, or sorry, it returns an empty object in some cases. So return empty object. So in that case, there are no updates. And so a re-render is not necessary because no state is going to be changed. And so up here, we can say object.keys, reduce changes.length. So if it has keys, then we'll return the reduced changes. Otherwise, we'll return null, and that will prevent an unnecessary re-render. in addition to that, they could also return null from their state reducer to indicate that, hey, I don't want any changes, and we want them to be able to do either. It's fine. You want to return an object, that's whatever. So we'll just add or an empty object so it doesn't blow up when we do object keys. So if they return null, we'll default that to an empty object. Okay, what questions do you have about state reducers? Yeah.
Thoughts on using like super.setState and just making this .setState transparent to the class, or would you rather just be explicit?
I see what you mean. So by like having set state, yeah, and then super. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. That'd be fine with me. I think that if I were to come into a code base and see like, oh, okay, we're just set state, la la la, and then I realize, oh wait, like that's actually not set state, not as I imagine. That might be confusing to me. But I'm totally cool with that if you want to do it that way. Then these would be set state, and that would be kind of nice. Like you said, transparent to like everywhere else in the code. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that'll pass the test. So feel free to do that if you want. Other questions or comments, observations? Okay, so one other thing that I was going to do this, but then I had some people review my stuff before the workshop, and they felt this was a little bit confusing, but I actually kind of like this. One thing that I did was I'd say return this array of changes, and then I'd call map on it over and over again, and then pull out the first one. And what this allows me to do is, rather than creating a bunch of variables, I can do this. See that? And then do this one. So that's the new changes. And each one plays into the next map. And we do this. And then we get rid of all this stuff. So if you're looking at that and you're also confused, feel free to continue using the variables. But what I like about this is I can easily add more operations to the changes object without having to create more variables. So what this is effectively doing is we turn this into an array only for the purpose of being able to call map on it. And it's going to just map over the one item. And then we pull the first item off, which is going to be our one item. So we say here are our changes. If it's a function, then we'll call it, and then we'll return the changes. And then here are the changes. We're going to reduce it, and then we'll return the changes. Here are the changes. We'll check its length, and then we'll return the changes. And then, so you can write it either way. I kind of think this looks kind of clean, but if it's confusing to you all, then that's why I did. In the solutions that you're going to be working with and stuff, it uses the variables, but I just wanted to show this to you. If you want to do it this way, that's totally cool too. Yeah, question? Okay. Is there something wrong with this implementation? Yeah, okay, so here, maybe I'll copy it over and I'll and the test pass. So I'm going to change this back to internal set state so I don't confuse myself. Okay, so their solution, comment that some more, was something like this. We'll change this to callback and change this to updater. Oops. Okay. So there are a couple of problems with this implementation. So as we were talking about before, you need to use, if you want your set state operation to reference pre-existing or the current state, and to avoid issues with set state batching, then you don't want to reference this dot state. You'll use an updater function. So that's the first thing that I would say to avoid here is make sure that all of the code that's referencing the current state lives within an updater function to avoid inconsistencies with state. Other than that, this actually looks like pretty similar to what we had here. And so yeah, other than that, it's pretty much the same. Here the updates, the user or the state reducer, whoever is using the state reducer could actually return an empty object or null. And so that's why we're doing this object.keys thing. But you could enforce in your API and say, hey, listen, if you don't want a re-render, then return null. If you return an object, then that's just what I'm going to return. I just added this little line for convenience. So, okay, so taking this back to what the solution is that you'll be looking at. Looks something like this. Okay, what other questions do you all have?